Hi there, this is Janna from Lilacpop Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to do a brass stamped bracelet from start to finish. I'm going to be using a vintage stamping machine that I picked up thinking that it was broken, and I wanted to take it apart and use the parts to make jewelry like I do with the old vintage machines that I use. But instead, when I got it back to my studio and started tinkering, I actually fixed it, and it's a lot easier to use than hand stamping. But even though I'm doing that for this bracelet, you can totally do it with stamps at home. They're very easy, you can pick them up anywhere. So once you start stamping, it's kind of addictive, because then you start looking around going, ooh, what else can I make into jewelry, and what else can I stamp? So it's a lot of fun. But I'm actually going to be starting with completely raw brass and cutting it and sanding it, and then we'll stamp it, and then we'll add the patina, and I'll show you how to do all of that stuff. So thank you for joining me. So to begin with, you're going to take your brass. I'm using pretty thick brass. I used to use thinner brass. I can't remember what gauge it is, but it's really thin and a little bit too bendy. So I started using a little bit thicker. It just makes the bracelet a lot more substantial. And because you're using brass, it's quite cheap. So it's not a big deal to use it if it's a little bit thicker. So you can actually order this online. You can get it in hardware stores. I like to get it, sometimes I get them pre-cut. Normally I would already have it pre-cut, but I ran out, so that's why I'm using one of these. I had these ones pre-cut to make bracelets out of, so I was bending them into cuffs and stuff, but they're really easy to use, so I'm going to show you how, and it's probably better anyways, because then I can show you how to use it. So because of the quarantine, I have been working mostly from home and kind of going back and forth between the studio and here, so I left my nice ruler at home, so this one will work. But so the width that I do, and you can do any width, it really doesn't matter. There's no real, rhyme or reason to this, but I'm using 3/4 of an inch width. And then I found that 2 inches in length really works. So I've already got one that's 2 inches. I'm just going to use that to measure. Like I said, there's really no rhyme or reason. I'm just going to scratch it into the metal so I know where to cut it. I like the look of it really being handcrafted, so I try not to, get it, like saw it and make it perfect, because I kind of like it when it's slightly, you can just tell it was made by hand, and I think that's pretty cool. So so I just cut it. I've got some snips here. Okay, so now that I have my piece here, you can take a little punch like this. This is an old vintage one, because most of the stuff that I use is vintage. You can use anything with a nice point. I mean, honestly, you could even use a screwdriver if that's all that you have. Just use a Phillips and get the little tip, or a nail, that works too. It's just kind of starting a little indentation. So that's going to be where we're going to put the jump ring through to hold it. So I just hand measure. I found that it's easier to find the center and figure out where to put it if you have the piece perpendicular to you like this. You can kind of center it a little bit better. I kind of find the first spot. You can be more precise about it, of course. You can actually measure and do all that, but for this, that works. Here's the thing too. If you don't have a drill, if you don't have fancy equipment, you don't really need it. I mean, seriously. You can buy tools like this at Michael's, and it's got a little thing that pops through, and actually, I may as well just do that instead of even drilling a hole, because it works out really well. You just pop it through. The only reason that I drill sometimes instead is because it doesn't, sometimes you get a little tiny nick right in there with this, but we'll just kind of buff it out, and since we're giving it a nice patina anyways, it's not really going to matter. So there is a little raised area. I take some little clippers and try and get as much off as possible. So I've just got a little sanding disc on here. Once you get those nice and soft so it's not gonna catch on you while you're turning and moving it around, then you do all the edges. Okay, it's looking good. You can kind of see how there's like still some gunk on there, and the metal's just basically dirty from sitting around. So what I like to do, I've tried using a Dremel before, and the Dremel just it just doesn't work very well. You get kind of little marks in there and stuff. And for this, since we're going to be putting a nice patina and we're stamping it, it doesn't need to be like perfectly smooth or anything like that. We just want to give it a nice buff. And I like to use this 3M stuff. It's super cheap and it works awesome, and it's really good for sterling silver if you're going to give it like that brushed look rather than bright shiny, and it's kind of an in-between shiny and oxidized, so it's a really handy thing to do. And here's a little side tip too: when you're doing like say the inside of a ring and you've got this big piece, just cut it. I've done that many times. You can just slice it and make a skinny cut, and then it fits right in all those nooks and crannies. So you just go back and forth. So it's nice and brushed. Next up, we're gonna stamp. So like I said earlier, you don't have to have a old vintage wonky stamping machine. You can totally do this with stamps. You can buy a kit like this one, where it's got them all nice and organized in there, and when you stamp it, you would just, you know, line it up. You can actually draw with a pencil a line, which really helps. You put it on there and you hit it with your hammer. Word of advice, if you are using stamps like this, make sure you hit it once and you hit it hard, because if you try and tap, 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 it is going to ghost and you're gonna screw up your piece. You're gonna have to start over. So, but since we're not using these, I'm gonna put these away. So, get a piece of scratch paper, write it out. Always write it out. This one I'm doing Fight Like a Girl. You write it out. Then it comes down to counting. You count every single letter and the space for each line. So this one I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I write 10 next to it. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The reason for that is you are going to take the middle. And if you're stamping with stamps, you find your middle in your piece. You're going to put your first stamp there, and you're going to go left, and then you're going to go right, or right, and then you're going to go left. That way, you know, you've got it centered. And same with the stamping machine. I find my middle on that one, because I do have to go left to right, because it actually like feeds it through the machine that way. So I'm going to find my middle, but then I'm going to count backwards to where I want the beginning. I've got 10 on the top and 6 on the bottom. This is my super wonko, but super awesome stamping machine. It is super old. I think it was used possibly during the war to do dog tags. The funny part is that this is supposed to turn when this turns and you change the letter, but it absolutely does not turn anymore. So all I use it for is like a cheat sheet, because I wrote the letters on the inside here, and I tend to, when I'm stamping a lot, actually put my finger in there and help move it. Because sometimes my hand actually gets sore if I'm stamping too much from up here. So there's a little metal piece that sticks out right here, and I put this blue tape on there, and it does help a little bit, but after a while it will tend to kind of like bruise my hand and hurt. So I kind of use my thumb. So it wears off, and this is kind of my cheat sheet, so I can at least see what order it's in, because I don't think there's any rhyme or reason, unless it's maybe the same as a typewriter, but it's really weird. So, and unfortunately there's no number sign, so I can't do hashtags, but I can do pretty much anything else. It's kind of cool. So what you do is you put your metal in here. There's a little tiny ridge that it fits into. Okay, so now that we have our piece all stamped, now we're going to give it a patina. your fingers have oils, so they're always going to get on the piece. And I found with this patina, and I am using Jack's, it's awesome. They have all different kinds. This one is the brass, bronze and copper darkener in brown, but they have it in black. They have it in all kinds of different things and for different kinds of metals. So this stuff is amazing. But however, if you have oils on your hands and you touch your piece and you put it into the patina, it won't stick, basically. So, and you also want to give it a little bit of a tooth to it. So I like to use gloves for this part so that I know I'm not messing it up. Plus, you know, using chemicals, you should probably use them anyways. There is a shortage on gloves for health reasons right now. I'm reusing my gloves for these reasons. It's a ridiculous glove. Whatever. Okay, so I'm going to give it another brush with this to kind of give it a little bit more tooth. And by tooth, I just mean a little bit of texture so that it has something to kind of cling to. I found that if you can get it a little bit rougher, it's better. Try not to touch it with my thumb. Should have used the good glove on that side. So you're going to use pliers. It will stain your pliers. So if you like your pliers to be like, you know, pristine, then be careful. But so you're just going to stick it in there. It happens really fast. If you're holding on to it with your pliers, be careful. It's better to drop it in because it will actually leave marks where the pliers were. You can see it starting to turn. You don't want to leave it in for too long either, because then the patina seems to come off a little bit. Oh shit, I'm out of water. Okay. So this is my first try. I put it in the solution, put it in the water, and it kind of started to come off almost a little bit. So it looks good like that, actually. I could totally stick with that, but I think I want to make it a little bit darker. I really like it when it looks nice and aged, so I'm going to put it back in and see if I can get it darker. Pretty darn perfect. Nice and dark. That's exactly how we want it. It took the patina really, really well, actually. So you're just going to take a little paper towel, dab it, get it dry, and you can totally like put it in the patina, rinse it, put it back in the patina. You know, you can go back and forth until you get exactly what you want. So and if it comes off right away, which like I said, if sometimes the metal is just weird and it happens, I can't even explain why sometimes. I do swear a lot when that happens, but anyways, if that happens, it's fine. You can totally rework this and keep going with it. You can just give it more of a sanding. You can actually rough it up with like a different kind of sandpaper. It all works. Now that we have our patina, you need some steel wool. I think it's like 00, 000, something like that. Very fine steel wool. Works like a charm. You just kind of play with it. Go back and forth till you get it exactly how you want it. You can start to see how it makes the letters pop. Now the cool thing is, if you're using stamped letters, all that patina will settle into the stamped part and make it like black. So then when you shine this part up, it's gonna really make it pop too. So it works either way. So even though it's backwards, you can kind of see what I mean. If that were stamped, that's more like what it would look like with traditional stamps. Alright, I think I've got it just how I like it. It's looking pretty good. So now we are going to shape it because we want it to fit on the wrist a little bit better. I start just by doing it by hand a little bit. And then I take my pliers. I've got these flat ones. Just start bending it a little bit. Bend it just a little bit at a time. You never want to really go at it because you'll just it's really hard to come back from that. Believe me, I've been there. So that's just like a little bit of a bend. I think I'm going to give it just a little bit more so it fits nicely. You don't really want to hammer it. Like, you could put it on a mandrel and hammer it, but then you're going to lose your nice patina. And actually, sometimes I do this before I even patina it, and that's cool too. Doesn't really matter. But, so now you can see it's got a nice, it's perfect. So, now we're going to give it, we're going to seal it. And I use Renaissance wax. I use this for all kinds of things. I've actually used it on Petoskey stones, and I frickin' love it. Because on a Petoskey stone, I hate shiny Petoskey stones. I hate it. So with this stuff, it gives it that sort of wet look, like when you pull it out of the river, but it's not shiny, and it seals it too. So I just use, you know, a nice clean cloth, grab a little bit of it. I'm gonna put this here to sit it on top of it because my thing is dirty. And you're gonna take something like that. You're gonna cover the whole thing. And that'll kind of keep the patina in there and shine, or not shine it up, but keep the patina from coming off. I mean, eventually there is wear and tear, so some of your patina will start to come off a little bit, but. And then you're gonna let it sit and dry for like a minute or two, and then kind of buff it up one more time just to get all the excess off. You know what cracks me up is when I watch other people's tutorial videos and their desk is absolutely clean. And here is my desk. It is a trash mess, but it's how I work. So this is just realistic, people. So I'm using this chain. I really like it. I think it needs to have like a chunky chain to go with it. I'm just gonna open up the junk rings. One, two, three, four, five, six on the other. However, I'm gonna leave one extra length instead of making it double. And that's what we're gonna use for it to kind of cling to the clasp. Jump ring. All right. Just like that, we have a bracelet all set. I usually do it about this length, unless customers say they have a skinny wrist or a bigger wrist, then I can always add on, but that's it. Totally customized.